The gravel crunched like broken teeth under my boots as I crossed the diner parking lot, that January wind knifing through my coat like it had a personal grudge. Inside Dugan's, the burnt coffee smell hit me first. Flo never could get the timing right on that percolator. Then the bacon grease sizzling on the flat top. Earl was already in our booth, fountain pen scratching something on a napkin, steam curling off his mug and the cold air leaking through the door seals. I slid in across from him, didn't even get my coat off before the bell over the door clanged again, louder than it needed to. Gina stormed in, her tablet glowing blue in her hands, and every head in the place turned. She didn't lower her voice. Didn't even try. "Why is your name still on a house with your dead wife?" Flo's coffee pot froze mid-pour. 3 booths went silent. I felt my jaw lock up the way it does when I know I'm about to pay for something I didn't do wrong. She slammed that tablet down on the table between Earl's napkin and my empty mug. The screen showed a real estate listing. My farmhouse, Cheryl's tulips in the photo. $485,000 just sitting there while we scrimp and save. Explain that to me, Raymond. I kept my voice level, quiet. That house belongs to Martin. End of story. He's 42 years old. He can buy his own damn house. She turned and walked out, that bell clanging behind her like a funeral toll. Earl didn't look up from his napkin, just slid it across the table toward me. "Ray," he said, real soft, "we need to talk about that will." I sat at my kitchen table that morning before the diner, same as I'd done for 40 years. The grain book open in front of me, my black coffee going cold in the mug Cheryl gave me back in '89. The handle's chipped, but it still holds heat. Mechanical pencil in my hand, updating the ledger, even though I'd retired from the elevator 3 years back. Old habits. Gina came down in her robe, phone already in her hand, scrolling through something. She poured herself coffee from the pot I'd made, added that fancy creamer she buys at the organic store. The smell of it, vanilla something, cut through the plain coffee smell I was used to. "Ray, I have a question about the farmhouse." I kept my eyes on the ledger. 43 years of harvest records, payments made, debts settled, every penny accounted for. "What about it?" "The property taxes, do you pay those, or does Martin?" "I pay them, always have." She sat down across from me, set her phone on the table face up. I could see a real estate website pulled up on the screen. "But he lives there. Shouldn't he be paying the taxes if he's living there?" "He pays rent. I handle the taxes. That's how we arranged it." "How much rent?" I looked up then. Her face was doing that thing it does when she's working an angle, the same expression she gets when she's staging a house for a client. Everything's a comp to her. Everything's got a number. "Enough to cover the upkeep. Why?" "I just think—" She stopped, took a sip of her coffee. "I called a real estate attorney friend yesterday, just curious about how these things work. Property ownership between family members, tax implications." The pencil felt heavy in my hand. Outside the window, I could see the bare oak branches scraping against each other in the wind, that dry rattling sound like old bones. "Gina, that house is Martin's business and mine. Has been for 8 years. I'm your wife, Ray. Doesn't that make it my business too?" I closed the grain book, slow and deliberate. The leather cover made a soft thump on the table. "I need to head over there this morning. Martin's got something he needs me to look at." She didn't say anything else, just picked up her phone and walked back upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. Not slam, just close. Somehow that was worse. The farmhouse sat 20 acres out from town. White clapboard that needed painting, red barn listing a little to the west, the old grain silo, visible from the kitchen window like a lighthouse in a sea of frozen fields. I pulled up the long driveway, gravel popping under my tires, and found Martin in the machine shed with his tractor, hood open, diesel smell thick in the cold air. "Hey, Dad." He didn't look up from whatever he was adjusting in the engine. His thermos sat on the workbench, steam still rising from the top. He'd been out here since before dawn. "Your mother used to say you got that early rising from me," I said, coming up beside him. "I told her you got your stubbornness from her." He smiled at that, wiped his hands on a rag. "Got something I need you to look at, not the tractor." When he led me back to the kitchen, the same kitchen where Cheryl and I ate breakfast for 35 years, where she died, in the hospital bed. We'd set up by the window so she could see her tulips one last spring. Martin had kept it mostly the same. Her recipe box still sat on the counter by the stove. He pulled a paper from the drawer by the phone. "County form. I need to do a controlled burn on the east field before planting, clear out the dead brush. But the permit application needs the landowner's signature." I took the paper from him. The wind outside made the old house creak, that sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. My name was typed in the property owner line, Raymond Holloway. When do you need this by? March 15th, before the ground dries enough to be dangerous. He poured himself fresh coffee from his thermos, and I caught the smell of it. The same cheap brand I drink, not the fancy stuff Gina buys. Dad, I gotta ask you something. Ask. Gina called me yesterday, wanted to know how much rent I pay you, wanted to know if I'd ever thought about buying you out. He set the thermos down, looked at me straight. Why would she ask me that? The kitchen felt colder than it had a minute ago. Through the window, I could see Cheryl's tulip beds under the snow, waiting for spring like they had for 40 years. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from Gina, "We need to talk. Tonight, non-negotiable." That Saturday morning, Dugan's Diner smelled like it always did. Burnt coffee, bacon grease on cast iron, and the faint chemical tang of Flo's cleaning solution on the vinyl booths. Earl was already there when I walked in, fountain pen out, napkin in front of him covered in his tight accountant's handwriting. The man spent 40 years as bank president, and he still couldn't break the habit of doing math on paper napkins. I slid into the booth across from him. Through the window, the grain silo was just visible over the roofline of the hardware store, gray against a grayer sky. Ray. He didn't look up. I've been running some numbers. Earl, it's 7 in the morning. Can a man get coffee before the numbers? Flo came over with the pot, filled my mug without asking. She'd been doing that for 30 years. You boys want the usual? Please, Earl said, still writing. She walked off and I wrapped my hands around the mug, felt the ceramic heat seeping into my cold fingers. Outside, a truck went by on the salt-wet road, that crunching sound of tire chains. I talked to my attorney friend, Earl said, finally looking up. About your situation. What situation? The farmhouse situation. The one where your new wife wants you to. The bell over the door clanged, and my stomach dropped before I even turned around. Gina came in fast, her heels clicking on the tile, that tablet in her hands like a weapon. She didn't sit down, just stood at the end of our booth, and her voice carried to every corner of that small room. Why is your name still on a house with your dead wife? The whole diner went quiet. Flo's coffee pot stopped mid-pour at the counter. Old Jim Tucker in the corner booth set down his newspaper. The cook's spatula stopped scraping the griddle. I felt heat crawling up my neck. Gina, this isn't the place. You want to know what I found out? She tapped the tablet screen, turned it to face me. A real estate listing, my farmhouse, Cheryl's tulips in full bloom in the photo. She must have pulled it from some old county record. $485,000, Ray. That's what it's worth. And your name is still on the deed with a dead woman's while we're eating box macaroni at home. Earl set his pen down, slow and deliberate. That house belongs to Martin, I said, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to crawl under the table. I've told you that. He's 42. He should buy his own house like the rest of us did. But no, Raymond Holloway can't let go of his shrine to St. Cheryl. That's enough. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. A few people shifted in their seats. I could feel Jim Tucker staring. Martin lives there. The house is his. End of discussion. End of discussion? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm your wife. I have a say in our finances. Unless you married me just to have someone to keep your bed warm while you worship at the altar of your first marriage. She turned and walked out before I could say anything else. The bell clanged behind her. The door settled back into its frame. Slowly, the diner sounds started up again. Spatula scraping, coffee pouring, Jim Tucker's newspaper rustling. Flo came over with the pot, topped off my mug even though it was still full. You okay, Ray? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Earl slid the napkin across the table to me. His handwriting swam in my vision for a second before I could focus on it. Numbers, dates, legal terms I didn't understand. What is this? That will you signed 8 years ago, Earl said quietly, leaning forward so only I could hear. The one right after Cheryl passed. You remember what it said? Left everything to Martin, the house, the land, whatever savings I had. And do you remember the provision about the farmhouse specifically? I tried to think back. Those weeks after Cheryl died were a blur of funeral arrangements and paperwork and nights sitting alone in a house that echoed. Something about Martin getting it when he turned 43, or when he was ready. I don't remember exactly. Earl's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. He picked up his fountain pen, tapped it against the napkin. The provision said Martin gets the house on his 43rd birthday, or upon your remarriage to another woman, whichever comes first. The diner sounds faded to a ringing in my ears. The coffee mug felt too hot in my hand suddenly. What are you saying, Earl? I'm saying you married Gina 18 months ago. He leaned back, let that sink in. Which means, legally speaking, Martin's owned that house for 18 months. You just never filed the paperwork to transfer the deed. Through the window, I watched a cardinal land on the bare branch of the oak tree across the street. First one I'd seen this year. Cheryl always said cardinals were good luck. Does Gina know? I managed to ask. Earl folded the napkin, tucked it in his shirt pocket. If she doesn't yet, she will soon. The next Saturday, Earl was already in the booth when I got there. Same napkin from last week unfolded in front of him, now covered in more numbers. The pen, that old fountain pen his father gave him when he made bank president, sat beside his coffee mug, cap off. Outside, the snow was starting to get that gray, tired look it gets in late February. Not melting yet, but thinking about it, I sat down across from him. Flo brought coffee without being asked, set down a plate of eggs and toast I hadn't ordered. She'd been doing that since the scene last week, feeding me like I was sick. You look like hell, Earl said. Didn't sleep much. Gina's still at her sister's? Yeah. 3 days now. The new house felt too big without her in it, too quiet. I'd caught myself checking my phone every hour like a teenage boy. Earl pushed the napkin toward me. I worked it out, the numbers. I looked at the figures he'd written. My pension, Martin's income from the farm co-op, the life insurance policy I'd never gotten around to updating, Social Security projections, property values. What am I looking at? A way forward. He tapped the napkin with one finger. You can provide for both families, Ray. The house stays Martin's. That's not even a question anymore. It's already legally his. But look here. He pointed to a figure circled in blue ink. This is what you've got in savings and life insurance. You split that evenly between Martin and Gina's baby, there's enough for college funds for both. More than enough. The coffee was too hot. I set it down, heard the ceramic clink against the saucer. Gina doesn't want college funds. She wants the house money. What Gina wants and what Gina needs aren't the same thing. Earl leaned back and the booth vinyl squeaked under him. But there's something else you need to know, about Cheryl. My chest tightened. What about her? When's the last time you looked in her recipe box? The one at the farmhouse. I tried to remember. Martin kept it on the counter, same place it had always been. I'd seen it last week when he showed me the burn permit. I don't know, years probably. Why? Cheryl came to see me 2 weeks before she died. Earl's voice got quieter, and I had to lean forward to hear him over the diner noise. She made me promise not to tell you until you needed to hear it. She left you something in that box, under the recipe cards. The smell of bacon grease was suddenly too strong, making my stomach turn. What kind of something? She wouldn't tell me exactly, just said when things got hard, and she knew they would get hard, you should look there, said she'd leave you a message. A truck rumbled past outside, tire chains clattering on the wet pavement. Through the window I could see the oak tree branches moving in the wind, still bare but with that faint green tinge at the tips that meant spring was coming, whether we were ready or not. Earl, I don't know if I can read something she wrote. Not now, not with everything. She wanted you to remarry, Ray. She told me that, clear as day. Said she didn't want you growing old alone in that house. He picked up his fountain pen, rolled it between his fingers. She also said the house had to go to Martin. Both things were true to her. She didn't see them as contradictions. My phone buzzed on the table. Text from Gina. Can we talk? Really talk? I stared at the words on the screen. 3 days of silence, and now this. Earl saw me looking. What are you going to tell her? I don't know yet. Well, figure it out soon, because if she gets a lawyer involved, starts demanding her share of that house, it's going to get ugly. And Martin's the one who'll get hurt. He slid another napkin across the table, this one with an address written on it. That's my attorney, a state law specialist. If you need to make this official, make sure Martin's protected. He can help. I picked up the napkin, felt the paper texture under my thumb, slightly damp from the condensation on Earl's water glass. The ink was already starting to blur at the edges. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. Well, you've still got to go home and face her. I finished my coffee, left money on the table for both our breakfasts. Outside, a cardinal landed on the oak tree, same branch as last week, bright red against the gray sky and dirty snow. My phone buzzed again. Tonight? Please? I typed back. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Then I started the truck and headed out to the farmhouse. If Cheryl had left me something, I needed to see it before I talked to Gina. Needed to hear her voice again, even if it was just words on paper. The new house smelled like Gina's vanilla candles when I walked in that evening. She'd come back sometime during the day while I was out. Her coat hung on the hook by the door, her purse sat on the kitchen counter. The lights were on in the living room, and I could hear the soft tap of her fingers on that tablet screen. She looked up when I came in. Her eyes were red, but her makeup was fresh. She'd been crying earlier, then fixed her face. I knew that look. "Hi," she said. Hi. I sat down in the chair across from her, not on the couch beside her. The distance felt intentional, like we were negotiating instead of talking. The HVAC hummed in the background, pushing warm air through the vents with that artificial whoosh sound that never quite felt like real heat. "I'm sorry about the diner," she said. "That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that in public." "No, you shouldn't have." She set the tablet down on the coffee table between us, screen dark. Her hands were shaking slightly. "But I'm not sorry about what I said. Ray, I need you to understand something." I waited. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, rattling the decorative shutters she'd insisted we install. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 weeks. I took the test the day before I asked about the farmhouse taxes. She leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "I wanted to be sure before I told you, and then I started thinking about the future, about this baby's future, about what we could provide. We can provide plenty, my pension, your real estate income." "That's not enough," her voice cracked. "Ray, I have 2 kids from my first marriage who barely speak to me. Their father disappeared, left me with nothing, and I worked myself half to death to give them what they needed, and they still ended up resenting me for it." She wiped at her eyes, careful not to smudge the makeup. "This baby is my last chance. Our last chance. And you're telling me we have to scrimp and save while you keep $500,000 locked up in a shrine to your dead wife?" The word shrine hit like a slap. I felt my jaw tighten. "That house is Martin's. You knew that when we got married. I knew you co-owned it with your ex-wife's name on the deed. I didn't know you'd just let it sit there forever, waiting for your 42-year-old son to maybe someday decide he wants to actually own it." "He lives there, Gina. It's his home." "Then let him buy it. Let him get a mortgage like everyone else." She stood up, started pacing. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor we'd picked out together last year. "We could sell that house, Ray. Put the money in retirement accounts, college funds, secure our future, secure this baby's future." I stood up too, felt my knees protest. 67 years old, and I felt every one of them right then. "I can't do that." "Can't or won't?" "Both." She stared at me, and I watched something shift in her expression. The crying wife became the real estate agent, calculating angles, measuring possibilities. "I hired a title search company," she said quietly, 2 days ago. My stomach dropped. "Do you know what they found? Your name and Cheryl's name are still on that deed, both of you. The county never recorded a transfer to Martin, which means, legally, Ray, you own that house, not Martin, you. And since we're married, no." The word came out harder than I meant it. "Don't finish that sentence. Since we're married, I have a legal claim to half your assets, including that house." The room felt smaller suddenly. The vanilla candle smell was cloying, fake. I wanted to be back at the farmhouse, smelling diesel fuel and old coffee and the honest dirt of 40 years. "You want to lawyer up over this?" I asked. "Is that what we're doing now?" "I want you to choose, Ray, your dead wife's memory or your living child's future." The silence stretched between us. The HVAC kicked off, and I could hear the house settling, that creaking sound new construction makes when it's trying to pretend it has history. "I need some air," I said, and walked out before she could respond. I drove to the farmhouse without thinking about it, pulled up just as the sun was setting behind the grain silo. Martin's truck was gone. He'd be at the co-op until late, helping with the evening equipment check. The house was dark except for the porch light he always left on. I had a key. I let myself in. The kitchen was clean, the way Martin kept it. His thermos sat draining by the sink. The recipe box was where it had always been, on the counter by the stove. Cheryl's handwriting on the lid, our family favorites. I opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. The smell of old paper and vanilla, real vanilla from the extract she used, not the fake candle kind, drifted up. Recipe cards for her pot roast, her apple pie, her chicken and dumplings, Martin's favorites, all of them. I lifted the stack of cards out. Underneath was a brown leather journal, small enough to fit in the box but thick with pages. Cheryl's handwriting on the first page, "For Ray, when you need me." I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten 10,000 meals, where I'd held her hand while she cried about the cancer, where Martin had done his homework as a boy. The wood was smooth under my palms, worn soft by decades of elbows and coffee mugs and family. I opened the journal. The entries were dated, the first one from 2 years before she died, when the cancer was still just a shadow on an x-ray. The last one a week before she passed. I flipped through, not reading, just looking for... There. An entry marked, "For, after I'm gone." My hands were shaking as I read it. "Ray, if you're reading this, you found someone. I'm glad. I know you, and I know you waited too long, felt guilty too much. But I need you to hear this from me. I want you to be happy again. I want you to find love again. That doesn't betray what we had. It honors it. The house goes to Martin. That's not negotiable. He needs roots. He needs to know that home is his, no matter what. You promise me that, and I know you keep your promises. But Ray, and this is important, make sure she knows, your new wife, whoever she is, make sure she understands that the house being Martin's doesn't mean there's no room in your heart for both families. I want you to love her. I want you to build a new life. The house is Martin's, but your love doesn't run out. There's enough for everyone. Tell her I said that. Tell her Cheryl Holloway, on her deathbed, wanted Ray to be happy again, wanted him to find someone who'd take care of him when I couldn't anymore. Tell her I'm grateful to her, whoever she is. Tell her there's room." The ink was smudged in place. She'd been crying when she wrote it. I sat there in the dark kitchen, the journal open in front of me, and for the first time since Cheryl died, I let myself cry for real. Not the dignified tears at the funeral or the quiet grief in the middle of the night. Real shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep. My phone buzzed. Text from Martin. "Dad, I just got a call from the county. They're denying my burn permit. Said there was a safety complaint filed. Do you know anything about this?" Then another text, this one a forwarded email. "A zoning complaint about unsafe agricultural burning practices. Filed 3 days ago on real estate office letterhead. Gina's office." I called Martin back immediately. He answered on the first ring, tractor engine rumbling in the background. "Dad, what's going on? Where are you?" "Still at the co-op, just finishing up. Did you see that email?" I stared at Gina's office letterhead on my phone screen. The complaint cited uncontrolled burning hazards and risk to neighboring properties. There were no neighboring properties within half a mile of Martin's field. "I saw it. Don't worry about the permit. I'll handle it." "How?" "They said the complaint has to be investigated before they'll approve anything. That could take weeks, and I need to burn by March 15th, or the ground will be too dry." His voice had that edge of worry I remembered from when he was young, coming to me with problems he couldn't solve alone. "Dad, if I can't clear that field, I can't plant. And if I can't plant..." "I said I'll handle it, son." A long pause. The tractor engine idled down. "This is about Gina, isn't it? About her wanting to sell the house." I didn't answer right away. Through the farmhouse window, I could see the field he was talking about. Dead brush standing in patches across the frozen ground. Come spring, it needed to burn so new wheat could grow. Simple as that, except nothing was simple anymore. "Just give me a day," I said. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Dad, tomorrow." I hung up before he could press me further. Sat there in Cheryl's kitchen with her journal open in front of me, her words about making room for both families, and Gina's sabotage glowing on my phone screen. The key to the safe deposit box was in my wallet. Had been for 8 years. I'd opened the box exactly once since Cheryl died, to put the will inside and try not to think about it again. It was time to think about it. I got to the bank at 8 the next morning. Earl was waiting outside, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He gave me one without a word, and we went inside together. The safe deposit room was small, windowless, smelling like metal and old paper, the kind of room where people keep the things they hope they'll never need to use. Earl stood by the door while I opened the box. The will was on top, exactly where I'd left it. Underneath it, a life insurance policy I'd taken out 5 years ago, after Gina and I started getting serious. I'd meant to tell her about it, meant to add her name as beneficiary, but I'd gotten cold feet, worried she'd ask why I was thinking about dying, so I'd just named Martin as primary and stuck it in the box with the will. I pulled both documents out, spread them on the small table. Earl came over, set his coffee down, and put on his reading glasses. He scanned the will first, running his finger down the page until he found the clause. Here, the farmhouse property and associated 20 acres shall transfer to Martin James Holloway upon the testator's remarriage or Martin's 43rd birthday, whichever occurs first. He looked up at me. You remarried 18 months ago. The house is legally Martin's, has been this whole time. But the deed not being updated doesn't change what the will says. It just makes it messier. He picked up the insurance policy, whistled low. Ray, this is $250,000. Martin's the sole beneficiary? Yeah. Does Gina know about this? I shook my head. Earl set the policy down, took off his glasses. Okay, here's what you do. You take this policy. He tapped the paper, and you split it. Make Martin and Gina's baby equal beneficiaries. That way both kids are taken care of. Then you take the will, and you get a lawyer to file the deed transfer. Make it official that Martin owns the farmhouse. Put it in writing so there's no question. Gina's gonna lose her mind. Gina already lost her mind. She filed a false zoning complaint to sabotage your son's livelihood. That's not a woman who's thinking straight. He picked up his coffee, took a long drink. But this insurance policy, this is how you show her she's wrong. Show her there's enough for everyone. Her baby gets the same as Martin. Nobody's getting cheated. The metal box felt cold under my hands. I looked at the will. Cheryl's name typed next to mine under testator's spouse, deceased. There's something else, I said, and pulled Cheryl's journal from my coat pocket. I found this at the farmhouse yesterday, in her recipe box. I showed Earl the entry, watched his face as he read it, saw his expression soften. She was a good woman, Ray. Best I ever knew. This might be exactly what Gina needs to hear. He handed the journal back carefully, like it was fragile. But you can't just show her the words. You have to show her the money, too. Show her you're not choosing Martin over her baby. Show her Cheryl wasn't either. I closed the journal, held it against my chest. The leather was warm from being in my coat. What if it's not enough? What if she still wants the house sold? Then you tell her no, and you mean it. Earl finished his coffee, crushed the cup in his hand. A man's word is his bond, Ray. You promised Cheryl that house would be Martin's. You keep that promise. But you also promised to love Gina and provide for her. You can do both. You just have to make her see it. We left the bank together, stepping out into late February cold that had a different quality than January's. Still freezing, but with the sun stronger, the ice starting to rot around the edges. Mud season was coming, the thaw. You want me to come with you? Earl asked. When you talk to her? No, this is between me and her. What about Martin? You going to tell him what she did? I thought about my son, waiting by the phone for me to call him, worried about his fields and his planting and his permit, thought about the tractor in the shed and the thermos on the counter and Cheryl's recipe box that he'd kept safe all these years. Not yet, I said. Not until I know what Gina's going to do. Earl clapped me on the shoulder. Call me after. Let me know how it goes. I drove home slowly, the journal and insurance policy on the seat beside me. The streets were wet with melting snow, that particular late winter mess of sand and salt and gray slush. A cardinal flew across the road in front of me, bright red against the dirty snowbanks. Cheryl's bird. Her blessing, she used to say. Gina's car was in the driveway when I got home. I sat in my truck for a minute, engine running, heat blowing, trying to find the right words. But there were no right words for this. There was just the truth, laid out in old journals and legal documents and the wreckage of two families trying to become one. I picked up the journal and the policy and went inside. Sunday morning, I stood in the church parking lot, watching Gina work the crowd after service. She'd gone without me, said she needed time to pray, to think. I'd come late, stood in the back, and now I watched her in a circle of women, tissues in hand, dabbing at her eyes. The parking lot was half mud, half ice. My boots squelched in the slush as I walked to my truck. The sun was warm on my face, almost spring-like, but the wind still had teeth. Ray. Flo from the diner stood by her car, purse clutched against her coat. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd been waiting for me. Flo, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. She glanced back at the church doors, at Gina still holding court with the ladies' group. Is what Gina's saying true, about you refusing to provide for the baby? My chest tightened. What exactly is she saying? That you're giving everything to Martin, that the new baby won't get anything because you're too busy protecting your first wife's memory. Flo shifted her weight, and I heard her boot crack through ice into mud beneath. That you told her the baby would have to make do while Martin gets a whole house handed to him. The cardinal from yesterday landed on the church steeple, bright against the white paint. I watched it for a moment, trying to keep my voice level. That's not true, Flo. Then what is true? Because half the town heard you two fighting at the diner, and now she's in there crying about how she doesn't know how she's going to manage. Flo's expression was pained. I've known you 30 years, Ray. I don't want to believe it, but I don't want to call a pregnant woman a liar either. The baby will be provided for, I promise you that. But the house is Martin's. That's not negotiable. I met her eyes. But that doesn't mean there's nothing for Gina's baby. That's not how this works. Flo studied my face, then nodded slowly. Okay, I believe you. But Ray, you need to tell people that. You need to set the record straight because right now, she's the one telling the story. She got in her car and drove off, tires spraying mud across my boots. I sat in my truck, watching Gina through the windshield. She'd moved to a different group now, more tissues, more sympathetic hands on her shoulders, building her narrative brick by brick. My phone rang. Martin. Dad, I need to tell you something. What is it? My boss called me yesterday. Wants to talk to me about a transfer opportunity. Says it's a promotion, better pay, but it's at the Western Branch, 300 miles away. He paused, and I heard a door close, like he'd gone somewhere private. He said Gina recommended me for it. Called him last week, apparently. Told him I was looking for new opportunities. The truck cab suddenly felt too small. I rolled down the window, let the cold air hit my face. Dad, you still there? I'm here. Why would she do that? Why would she try to get me transferred away? I knew why. If Martin wasn't living at the farmhouse, it would be easier to argue. He didn't need it. Easier to push for a sale if the house sat empty. She was clearing the board, removing obstacles. Don't take the transfer, I said. I wasn't planning to, but Dad, this is getting out of hand. First the burn permit, now this. What's she trying to do? Through the windshield, I watched Gina hug one of the church ladies. Saw her mouth form words I couldn't hear but could guess. He doesn't care about our baby. He only cares about the past. I'm ending this, I said. Tomorrow, I promise. How? Let me handle it. I hung up before he could argue. Started the truck, let it idle while I watched Gina finish her performance. She was good at this, the real estate agent who knew how to stage not just houses, but whole narratives. How to make people see what she wanted them to see. But she hadn't counted on Cheryl's journal, hadn't counted on the insurance policy, hadn't counted on Earl's napkin math showing there was enough for everyone. She turned then, saw my truck idling in the parking lot. Our eyes met across 50 feet of mud and melting snow. Something flickered in her expression, surprise maybe, or fear. She said something to the women around her, then started walking toward me. I didn't wait. Put the truck in gear and drove out of that parking lot, mud spraying behind me. I had one more stop to make before I faced her. One more piece I needed to put in place. The county zoning office would be closed until Monday, but I knew the clerk, had known her since she was in high school. Before she married and took this job, I had her home number. It was time to make a call, time to trace that anonymous complaint back to its source, time to show Gina I wasn't the man she thought I was, not the grieving widower stuck in the past, not the pushover who'd caved to pressure. I was a man who kept his promises. All of them, even the hard ones. That night, I sat alone in my workshop, the one attached to the garage of the new house. Gina had wanted me to turn it into a home gym, but I'd held firm on this one thing. A man needs a place to think, to work with his hands, to be alone with his thoughts. The space smelled like motor oil and sawdust and the particular metallic cold of tools in winter. I had Cheryl's journal open on the workbench in front of me, the insurance policy beside it, and the will Earl had helped me understand. 3 documents that told 3 different stories, except they weren't different at all. They were the same story, just told in different languages, love and money and law. I read Cheryl's entry again. Make sure she knows. There's room in your heart for both families. But was there? I'd been so focused on keeping my promise to Cheryl, on protecting Martin's inheritance, that I'd stopped seeing what Gina was actually afraid of. Not that there wasn't enough money, that there wasn't enough love, that I'd spend the rest of our marriage comparing her to a ghost she could never measure up to. The workshop door opened. Gina stood there in her coat, arms wrapped around herself against the cold that poured in from outside. I saw the light on, she said. I didn't say anything, just looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since this whole mess started. She looked exhausted, scared. Her hand kept moving to her stomach, that unconscious gesture pregnant women make. Can I come in? I nodded. She closed the door behind her, stood by the tool bench. The overhead bulb cast harsh shadows under her eyes. She looked older than 49 right then. Looked like someone who'd been fighting a war she was losing. I called Martin's boss, she said quietly. About the transfer. I know. And I filed the zoning complaint. About the burn permit. I know that too. Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones, not the performance kind from church. I don't know why I did it. I keep thinking about my first marriage. How I gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. How he left anyway, and I had nothing. No house, no savings, no security. Just 2 kids who blame me for their father leaving. She sat down on the old stool I kept by the workbench, the one that wobbled. Didn't seem to notice or care. When I found out I was pregnant again, at my age, I thought, this is my chance to get it right, to build something stable that nobody can take away. And then I find out you own a house worth $500,000 that you're just giving away to your adult son while we're eating cheap pasta and I'm trying to figure out how to afford a crib. Her voice cracked. It felt like I was being erased, like this baby was already second class before it was even born. I picked up the insurance policy, held it out to her. What's this? Read it. She took it with shaking hands. I watched her eyes move down the page, saw the moment she got to the beneficiary line. Her mouth opened slightly. $250,000? Split evenly, half to Martin, half to our baby. I'm having it redrawn this week to make it official. She stared at the paper like it might disappear if she blinked. Ray, The house goes to Martin. That's not changing. I promised his mother, and I keep my promises. I picked up Cheryl's journal, held it for a moment. But that doesn't mean there's nothing for our child. It doesn't mean I'm choosing him over you. It means I'm keeping my word to everyone I love. But the house is worth so much more. The house isn't mine to give you, Gina. It never was. I opened the journal to Cheryl's entry, slid it across the workbench to her. Read this, please. She picked it up carefully, like it might burn her. I watched her face as she read, saw the tears start fresh. Her hand covered her mouth. She wrote this before she died? A week before. Earl told me about it 2 weeks ago. I only read it yesterday. Gina read it again, slower this time. When she looked up, her face was wet. She wanted you to be happy. She wanted you to remarry. Yes. And she knew the house would go to Martin. Yes. So she knew there'd be someone like me, a second wife, and Gina's voice broke completely. She was grateful to me for taking care of you. I didn't trust myself to speak, just nodded. She set the journal down like it was made of glass, looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes in weeks, maybe months. Something like understanding, like she was finally seeing past her own fear to what was actually there. I thought I was competing with a saint, she whispered. I thought you'd never love me the way you loved her. I won't, I said, and saw her flinch. But that doesn't mean I love you less. It means I love you different. She was my first love, the mother of my son, the woman I built a life with for 35 years. You can't compete with that because you're not supposed to. You're something new, something that doesn't erase what came before but adds to it. She was crying hard now, that ugly crying where you can't catch your breath. I've been so awful. Ray, the things I did, calling Martin's boss, filing that complaint, telling people at church. I know. How can you forgive me? I thought about that, about Cheryl in her hospital bed, making me promise to find happiness again, about Martin living in his mother's house, keeping her recipe box safe, about the baby growing inside Gina, my grandchild, innocent of all this mess we'd made. Because the alternative is worse, I said finally. Because you're my wife, and I meant those vows, because our baby deserves parents who can figure this out. I picked up the journal again. And because Cheryl told me to, she told me there was room. I'm choosing to believe her. Gina stood up, crossed the small space between us, and put her arms around me. I held her while she cried, felt her shake against me. The workshop was cold, the wind rattling the windows, but we stood there anyway. I need to apologize to Martin, she said into my shoulder. Yes. And fix the burn permit thing. Yes. And stop telling lies at church. That would be good. She laughed, a watery sound, pulled back to look at me. Can we go to the farmhouse tomorrow? All three of us? I need to see it. Really see it. Not as property or competition, but as Martin's home. As what it actually is. I think Martin would like that. She nodded, wiped her face with her sleeve. Ray, thank you for not giving up on me even when I was being... We don't have to relive it. Let's just move forward. She kissed me then, soft and brief, picked up Cheryl's journal, held it close to her chest. Can I keep this? Just for tonight? I want to read the rest of it. It's yours if you want it. She nodded, started toward the door, then stopped. The baby. If it's a girl, can we name her Cheryl? Something in my chest broke open. She'd like that. Gina smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in weeks, and went back into the house. I sat alone in the workshop for a long time after, listening to the wind and thinking about promises and forgiveness and the strange mathematics of love that doesn't divide but multiplies. The farmhouse kitchen smelled like Martin's morning coffee and something else, pot roast in the slow cooker, one of Cheryl's recipes. I could smell the carrots and onions, the rich beef smell that meant he'd started it before dawn. The March sun came through the window warmer than it had any right to be, hitting the kitchen table where the three of us sat. Martin poured coffee into 3 mugs. His hands were steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He'd agreed to this meeting, but he didn't know what it was about. Didn't know Gina had spent the last 2 days calling the county, calling his boss, undoing the damage she'd done. Gina sat across from me, her hands wrapped around her mug, but not drinking. She'd barely slept, I could tell, had spent half the night reading Cheryl's journal, the other half working on what she was going to say. Thank you for having us, she started, looking at Martin. I know this is your home, and Her voice caught. She set down the mug, pressed her palms flat on the table. The same table where Cheryl and I had eaten 10,000 meals. I need to apologize to you. Martin looked at me confused. I gave him a small nod. I'm the one who filed the complaint about your burn permit, Gina said. I called the zoning board, made up concerns about safety, and I called your boss about that transfer. I was trying to... She stopped, took a breath. I was trying to force your father to sell this house. I thought if you weren't living here, if there were obstacles to you staying, he'd finally let it go. The silence in that kitchen was heavy. Outside, I could hear a tractor in the distance, somebody else getting ready for spring planting. A cardinal called from Cheryl's tulip beds, where the first green shoots were starting to push through the mud. Martin's face had gone carefully blank, the way it does when he's processing something difficult. Why would you want him to sell it? Because I was scared? Gina's eyes filled. Scared there wouldn't be enough for my baby. Scared your father loved your mother more than he'd ever love me. Scared I'd spend my whole marriage competing with a memory I could never live up to. She reached into her purse, pulled out Cheryl's journal, and slid it across the table to Martin. Your mother left this. Your father found it in her recipe box. Martin picked it up, opened it to the marked page. I watched his face as he read his mother's words, saw his jaw tighten, his eyes get wet. She wanted Dad to remarry, he said quietly. Yes, and she wanted this house to be yours. Both things were true to her. They weren't contradictions. Gina pulled out the insurance policy next, set it beside the journal. Your father made sure my baby is provided for, equally. This isn't about choosing between you. It never was. Martin looked at the policy, then at me. Dad, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. You're both my children. You both deserve security. I leaned forward, my coffee forgotten. The house is yours, Martin. That's not changing. The will made it official 18 months ago when I married Gina. The automatic transfer clause I'd forgotten about kicked in. You've legally owned it this whole time. We just need to file the deed to make it clear to everyone. I didn't know that. Neither did I until Earl explained it. But that's not the point. The point is your mother wanted you to have roots. And she wanted me to find happiness again. She didn't see those as opposing things. I picked up the journal, found another entry, one I'd marked last night. Listen to this. She wrote it 2 months before she died. Martin will always be our boy, Ray, but don't let that stop you from loving more children, whether they're yours or someone else's. The heart doesn't have a capacity limit, it just grows. Martin set the journal down, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. 30 years of his mother's love in those pages, and permission for all of us to move forward. I owe you an apology too, he said, looking at Gina. I've been cold to you, distant. I think part of me thought if I accepted you, I was betraying Mom, but she wouldn't have wanted that. Gina's tears spilled over. I don't want to replace her. I can't. I just want to be part of this family, part of your father's life, and I want my baby to know their big brother. Martin stood up, came around the table, and hugged her. She clung to him, this woman who'd tried to force him out, and he held her like she was family, like she already was family. I had to look away, out the window at the fields that needed burning, at the tulip shoots pushing through, spring coming whether we were ready or not. I called the county this morning, Gina said when they pulled apart. Withdrew the complaint. Your burn permit should be approved by end of week. Thank you. And I called your boss, told him you're not interested in the transfer, that I'd misunderstood your intentions. He was very understanding. Martin nodded, sat back down. What about church? Flo said you were talking to people. Gina's face colored. I'm handling that too. I'll talk to Pastor Jim today. Set the record straight. Tell them I was wrong, that I let fear make me cruel. She looked at me. Your father is the most honorable man I know. I'm not going to let anyone think otherwise. The pot roast timer went off. Martin got up to check it, and the smell that filled the kitchen was pure comfort. Cheryl's recipe, Martin's hands, the same meal that had fed this family for 40 years. Stay for dinner? Martin asked. Both of you? I looked at Gina. She nodded, wiping her face. We'd like that, I said. Martin pulled the pot roast out, set it on the counter. Through the window, I watched the cardinal land on the fence post by the tulip beds. Cheryl's bird, her blessing. I need to show you something, I said, standing up. Both of you. I led them to the barn, to the old filing cabinet where I'd kept farm records for decades. Pulled out the deed, the original one, from 1987, when Cheryl and I bought this place. Her name and mine, side by side. I'm filing the transfer this week, I said, making it official that Martin owns this, but I wanted you both to see this first. Wanted you to understand what this place is. Gina touched the paper, traced Cheryl's name with her finger. She built this with you. For 35 years, and now it's Martin's to build on. To raise his own family in someday, if he wants, to pass down to his children. I looked at both of them. That's what inheritance is, not just money or property. It's continuity. It's knowing where you come from so you know where you're going. What about our baby? Gina asked quietly. Where will they know they come from? From us, from the home we build together, from the life insurance that'll send them to college, from a father who keeps his promises and a mother who learned to forgive herself. I put my arm around her, and from a big brother who'll teach them about family and land and keeping your word. Martin folded the deed carefully, handed it back to me. When you file this, can you do me a favor? What's that? Add a note to the county records. Something that says this house was a gift from Raymond and Cheryl Holloway to their son Martin. Both of you, together. My throat tightened. Your mother would like that. I know she would. He looked at Gina. And I want you to know, when this baby comes, they're welcome here any time. This is their family home too, not to own, but to visit, to know where their father's roots are, to understand the whole story. Gina started crying again, but she was smiling through it. Thank you. We walked back to the house together, the three of us, and ate pot roast at Cheryl's table, while the afternoon sun warmed the kitchen and the tulips started their slow push toward bloom. After dinner, Martin walked us out to the truck. The burn permit approval letter was already in his mailbox. Gina had paid extra for rush processing. He held it up, grinning. Guess I can clear those fields after all. Guess so. Dad. He looked at me, then at Gina. Thank you, both of you, for figuring this out. I shook his hand, pulled him into a hug. Your mother would be proud of you, son, the man you've become. How you handled all this? She'd be proud of you, too, for keeping your promises. All of them. We drove home through the late March afternoon, past fields starting to green up, past the grain silo standing sentinel over the land. Gina held Cheryl's journal in her lap, the insurance policy tucked inside it. Ray, she said as we pulled into our driveway. I think I understand now. What you've been trying to tell me. What's that? Love doesn't run out when someone dies. It just makes room for more. I reached over, took her hand. Cheryl knew that. Took me longer to learn it. Better late than never. Inside together, into the house we were still learning to make a home. The county clerk's office smelled like coffee and copy toner, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Martin and I stood at the counter while Karen, who'd been processing deeds in this office since before Martin was born, stamped the transfer papers with official efficiency. That's it, she said, sliding the papers across to us. Martin James Holloway is now the sole legal owner of 4782 County Road 19, an associated 20 acres. She looked up over her reading glasses at Martin. Congratulations. That's good land you've got there. Thank you, ma'am. Your mama would be happy to see this, Karen added, her voice softening. Cheryl was good people. Yes, ma'am, she was. Karen pulled out another form, set it in front of Martin. Now, about that burn permit you applied for. The complaint's been withdrawn, safety inspection passed yesterday. Just need your signature, here, as the legal landowner, and you're approved. Martin signed it, and I watched the pen move across the paper, his handwriting so much like Cheryl's it made my chest ache. The same careful loops, the same way of crossing his T's. We walked out into May sunshine, the kind that actually has warmth in it instead of just brightness. The oak trees on the courthouse lawn had leafed out, that fresh green that only lasts a few weeks before summer darkens it. A cardinal sang from the top branch. Feels different, Martin said, looking at the deed in his hands, seeing it on paper. Your mother wanted you to have something solid, something nobody could take away. I know. He folded the papers, tucked them in his jacket pocket. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think she knew, when she wrote that journal entry, when she made you promise? Do you think she knew how hard it would be, keeping both promises? I thought about that, about Cheryl, in her hospital bed, making me swear Martin would have the house, making me promise I'd find love again. About the journal hidden in her recipe box, waiting for the right moment. Yeah, I said. I think she knew exactly how hard it would be. That's why she left the journal. She knew I'd need to hear it from her. She always was smarter than both of us. Still is. Martin looked out across the courthouse square, at the diner where this whole mess had started 3 months ago. You want to get coffee? At Dugan's? Earl's probably in there. I'd like that. Earl was in our usual booth, fountain pen out, napkin covered in numbers. Some things never change. He looked up when we walked in, and a smile spread across his weathered face. Well, if it isn't the landed gentry, he said, scooting over to make room. Martin slid in next to him. Just came from the county office. It's official. Good. That's good. Earl set his pen down. How do you feel? Relieved, scared, grateful. Martin laughed. Like I'm finally grown up and I don't know if I'm ready for it. Nobody's ever ready. You just do it anyway. Earl looked at me. How's Gina? Good. She's at church right now talking to Pastor Jim, setting things straight. About time. Half the congregation thinks you're some kind of monster. The other half thinks she's crazy. Town needs to move on to new gossip. Flo came over with the coffee pot, filled 3 mugs without asking. She looked at Martin, then at me. Something different in her expression than the last time we'd been here. Heard what happened, she said, with the house and the baby and all of it. She set the pot down, put her hand on my shoulder. I owe you an apology, Ray. I believed things that weren't true. I should have known better. You were protecting someone you thought was being hurt. Can't fault you for that. Still, I'm sorry. She squeezed my shoulder once, then picked up her pot and moved to the next table. Earl pushed a napkin across to us. More numbers. I did some calculations. With the insurance split, both kids' college funds fully funded, and your pension, you and Gina should be comfortable. More than comfortable. She's not worried about money anymore, I said. Not since she read Cheryl's journal. That woman always did have a way with words. Earl folded his napkin, tucked it in his pocket like he always did. His pockets must be full of financial wisdom written on diner napkins. So what's next, for both of you? Martin wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. I'm burning the East Field next week, getting ready for spring planting, wheat this year like always. And you? Earl asked me. Gina's got her 20-week ultrasound next month. We'll find out if it's a boy or girl. You hoping for one or the other? I thought about that, about the baby growing inside Gina, my child, Martin's sibling, about the family we were building from the wreckage of misunderstanding and fear. I'm hoping for healthy, I said. Everything else is just details. Martin's phone buzzed. He looked at it, smiled. Gina just texted. She's done at church, wants to know if we want to come for dinner tonight. She's making pot roast. Using Mom's recipe? Martin asked. I pulled out my phone, read the text. Using your mother's recipe. Says she wants to learn to cook the old family favorites. Earl raised his coffee mug. To new beginnings that honor old promises. We clinked our mugs together, ceramic on ceramic, and drank to that. That evening, we gathered around the table in the new house. The one that had felt too empty, too modern, too much like a staged property instead of a home. But with Martin there, and Gina smiling as she served pot roast from Cheryl's recipe, it felt different. Felt like maybe we were building something after all. I did something today, Gina said, setting down the serving dish. After I talked to Pastor Jim. What's that? I bought a frame, a nice one. She went to the counter, came back with something wrapped in tissue paper, and handed it to Martin. For you, for the farmhouse. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was Cheryl's journal entry, the one about making room, about loving more children, about the heart not having a capacity limit. Gina had photographed it, printed it, and framed it in dark wood. I thought you could hang it in your kitchen, she said quietly. So she's always there, reminding us. Martin's eyes filled. Thank you. And I made copies, one for us too. And she pulled another frame from behind her back, set it on our table. Because she was right, about all of it. I looked at Cheryl's handwriting behind glass, her words that had saved our family. The heart doesn't have a capacity limit. It just grows. To Cheryl, Martin said, raising his water glass. To Cheryl, Gina echoed. To Cheryl, I said, my voice rough. Who's still teaching us how to love? We ate dinner together, the three of us, while outside the May evening settled into dusk and the Cardinals sang their last songs before dark. The pot roast tasted exactly like I remembered. Like home, like history, like promises kept. After Martin left, Gina and I stood at the kitchen window watching his taillights disappear down the road toward the farmhouse. Her hand found mine. I'm glad you didn't give up on me, she said. I made a promise. I know, you keep your promises. She turned to face me. All of them. I try. That's all any of us can do. She was right. We try. We fail. We try again. We make room. The Cardinal sang one more time before flying off into the gathering dark. Some men think you have to choose between honoring the dead and loving the living. I'm here to tell you that's not true. A man with integrity does both. I kept my promise to Cheryl. Martin got the farmhouse, got his roots, got the security of knowing home would always be there. But I also kept my promise to Gina, to love her, to provide for our family, to build a future together that doesn't erase the past but makes room for it. Gina thought she was competing with a ghost. Turned out Cheryl was rooting for her all along. Sometimes the dead have more grace than the living. Sometimes they see clearer what we need because they're not tangled up in fear anymore. Love doesn't run out when someone dies. That's what I've learned. It doesn't divide between families or split between children or get used up like money in an account. It just grows, makes room, expands to hold whatever needs holding. The farmhouse sits out there on County Road 19, white clapboard and red barn, and Cheryl's tulips blooming every spring. Martin burns his fields and plants his wheat and keeps his mother's recipe box on the counter where it's always been. When our baby comes, a girl, we found out last week, named Cheryl like Gina wanted, she'll grow up knowing that farmhouse too, not as her inheritance but as her history, as the place where her father's first family built something solid that couldn't be shaken. And us? We're building our own solid thing right here in this new house that's starting to feel less staged and more lived in, starting to accumulate the scratches and stains and wear that turns a property into a home. I keep Cheryl's framed journal entry on my workshop wall now. Look at it when things get hard, when I need reminding. The heart doesn't have a capacity limit. It just grows. She was right about that. She was right about everything. Spring came like it always does. Patient, inevitable. full of new growth, pushing through old ground. The cardinals returned to nest in the barn eaves. The wheat fields greened up under Martin's care. And somewhere inside Gina, our daughter grew, carrying both our names forward into whatever comes next. I'm 67 years old, and I'm still learning how to love. Still learning that keeping promises doesn't mean you can't make new ones. Still learning that the best way to honor the dead is to live fully with the living. Cheryl would be proud of us, I think. All of us. The house isn't haunted, it's blessed. And now, so are we.